Hey 3Wins Fitness fam. Today we're going to be talking about two very important exercises, the squat and the deadlift. Both of these exercises are very important to learn and practice because they're involved in the majority of our daily activities. Anytime we sit down and get back up, we're squatting. Anytime we pick something up off of the floor, we're deadlifting. To get into an ideal squat position, we want to open up our feet slightly wider than hip width, and we want to flare our toes out in a V-like position. From there, it's important to note that we want to bend at the knee and the hip at the same time, pushing the hip back. It's important that we also keep our chest nice and proud. When we come down into squat position, we want to go for parallel. A parallel position is when the knee and the hip are in line. If you can't go there yet, a quarter squat is equally as effective. While there's room for variation in these movements, three things to keep an eye out for are making sure that your stance is at least hip width when coming down into a squat. It's important also to make sure that the heels don't come up off of the ground. It's important to make sure your back is nice and flat. We don't want to arch our back first and then come into that position. Remember, feet slightly wider than hip width, toes flared out, bend at the knees and the hips, come down, keep that chest nice and proud, and come back up. If you don't feel comfortable with the squat just yet, that's okay. We have a variation for you. Our variation is going to be the sit to stand. We're going to need a chair. We're going to start off in that seated position. From here, we want to come into that ideal squat position where our feet are slightly wider than hip width and our toes are flared out in a V position. From here, we also want to make sure that our chest is nice and proud. We're going to stand up nice and tall. Here, we're going to come back down, slowly sitting onto the chair, and then come right back up. If you've ever heard or seen a deadlift, you're probably thinking about the weightlifting emoji and this movement. While that may seem intimidating at first, we're going to talk about how you can do a deadlift with household items. A deadlift is a movement that incorporates both the squat and the hip hinge. If you are unfamiliar with the hip hinge or need a refresher, go to our week 1 strength video to learn about the hip hinge. To get into our ideal deadlift position, we want to come into our parallel squat. Important reminder is keeping our feet slightly wider than hip width, bending the knee and the hip at the same time, and keeping our chest nice and proud. Coming down into that parallel squat, this is where we incorporate our household object, like a broom or a stick. The deadlift is a pushing action, pushing up off of the floor, coming up to a tall position. In that deadlift position, we're rising the hips and the chest slowly, and then thrusting our hips forward. While this activity may seem awkward with the broom, another way to look at it is picking groceries up off of the floor. When picking those groceries up, it's important to bend those knees and come up slowly to reduce the strain put on the body.